Hello, everyone, and welcome to our November First Friday webinar. This month we have Janie Sacco, and she'll be presenting on submitting a Northwest NWACUHO program proposal. Remember that if you have any comments or questions, you can go ahead and add those in the live chat, and I'll be sending those over to Janie, and then at the end, I'll put in the assessment for you all to fill out at the end. But for now, we're going to throw it over to Janie, and you can get started.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having an excellent Friday morning. I'm very excited to talk to you about submitting a program proposal. So I'm just going to share my screen and get us started. Awesome. So we'll go ahead and get started. So submitting a Northwest NWACUHO conference proposal. What I'm going to do is walk you a bit step by step through the document so that way you can see what goes into submitting a conference proposal. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about universal design for learning today. So we could talk about ways to make your program a bit more accessible and how you can write that into your conference proposal. So our learning objectives for today is you're going to learn about the components of and how to submit a program proposal. We're going to talk a bit about the 3 domains of universal design for learning. And then we're also going to talk about 3 to 5 ways you can actually apply those concepts to the program proposal and ultimately your program. So the first thing I want to talk about is the proposal overview. So when you go to the Northwest NWACUHO website and take a look at the proposal, you're going to see the ability to start submitting it. But in order to submit it, you need to be prepared to submit your final version of the document because sections are required. So what we've done on the website is outlined all the categories and descriptions of the program proposal, basically everything you're going to need in that application, so that way you can prepare it ahead of time. My big recommendation is to write out all of your notes and items that you'd want to include in a Word document beforehand, and then transfer that over to the Google form. So I divided the program proposal up into 2 halves, your categories and then your description. So the first thing you're going to want to do is categorize your program. You're going to want to talk about your session type, your target audience, and your program track. And then the second half of the program proposal, what you're going to want to do is talk about the description of your program, which includes the abstract, which is what all of the participants will see in the program, a detailed description for the program task force reviewers, learning objectives for your program, as well as an outline. And so these are all things that we will look at as reviewers on the programming task force to make sure that the program proposal is solid and will present and yield a good program for the conference. The other thing I want to mention before we get into this is that the deadline for this is December 3rd at 11:59 p.m. So you have, at this point, a month to work on your proposal and get that all sent in for us. And also the programming task force is made up of your peers. So it's folks from various regions within Northwest NWACUHO, folks who have submitted program proposals before, folks who have not. So we have a good variety of folks who are sitting on the task force, and we're all eager and excited to see what you all come up with. So let's talk a little bit about your program session type. So there are 4 types of programs that you can submit as part of a program proposal. The first is a collaborative information share. And what that is it is a program that focuses on sharing a process or philosophy within your department, within your division, anything like that, a project, a task that you do that's very specific. And the thing about a collaborative information share is that this process or philosophy can be implemented on many campuses. So you don't necessarily need to be a private school, small school, large school, religiously affiliated, community college. You can be any type of campus or any type of residential education or housing department, and you should be able to implement the information brought forth in this session type. The second type of presentation is a case study presentation. So this shares the results of an experience. So instead of giving a broad overview of a philosophy like the collaborative information share, this case study presentation is going to share specific results from an experience or kind of like a one-time initiative that occurred. It actually might also be a recurring initiative, but the idea is that it's very focused. The other thing is that it can be implemented at similar institutions. So I want to be really clear about how these 2 are different. So as you can see, one is more of a broader process or philosophy that has many, translates to many different types of institution. The case study presentation is very specific, and it focuses on something similar institutions could implement. So for example, if I worked at a small university and I wanted to share a case study, I would focus my content on how this specific initiative or this specific project could be used at other similar small institutions. The third type of session you could select to do is a panel discussion. Panel discussions are really great because they're interactive. They're based on question and answer. So the participants in your session do a lot of the work to make sure that the content is great. So they're getting the opportunity to interact with the panel, ask questions. And it also brings together a variety of perspective. So this might be a great session type to use if you want to talk about a larger umbrella topics. For example, if you want to talk about RA structure and pay, you could talk about that as a panel discussion and have a variety of folks from different institutions participate. If you want to do something like furthering your education, whether to get an EDD or a PhD, you can have a panel discussion on that. We've seen a variety of topics at Northwest UCUHO that have been very helpful, and a panel discussion can be really beneficial if you are interested to gain a variety of perspectives presented to your target group. It's, again, very interactive based, and it's a really great idea if you're submitting a program proposal for a panel discussions to, in your description, have questions outlined of what you will ask as a moderator. Great. And then interactive learning activity. So this one, this session type engages all learners through an activity. So the crux of this is the information, but the information is not presented lecture style or discussion based. It's instead presented in a way that gets the participants up and moving, participating, constructing learning. And so that's what makes this a very specific program session type. The emphasis is on learning by doing. So whatever you're teaching or imparting as the programmer, folks are going to be able to have a hands-on participation. In the past, that's looked like getting in small groups and working on maybe case studies or questions. It might be developing a sample RA training schedule. It might be working on housing assignments and developing a process for that. So it engages this. So it's basically kinesthetic learning, learning by doing, which is the main focus of that interactive learning activity. And the idea is for this program session as well that participants will learn from doing the activity, but they might also be able to take that activity and replicate on their campus as needed. So that is a basic overview of the 4 session types you could select as a potential presenter. The next thing you're going to want to do is your categorizing is think about your target audience. It's absolutely okay to have a program proposal submitted that focuses on only one target audience. So you can click you're able to click which one fits best. For example, you might decide that your target audience is entry-level professionals, so folks who are in their first 3 years as a full-time staff member, and that's absolutely fine. You might also decide that your program focuses on mid-level professionals, so folks who are supervising other full-time professionals, and that's also great. I think that deciding on a specific target audience is very helpful. It can be very helpful when folks are deciding what program to go to. We also want to make sure as an organization that at this conference we have a variety of target audiences that are being reached. So it's something the programming task force will look to see like how participants are able to engage, like are folks at all levels able to participate in programming. So picking a target audience and making sure that's accurate is really important. One target audience we've added this year that I want to particularly highlight is advancing professionals. So we've added this category for a program proposal that really targets folks who are in like 4 to 7 years of being in housing residence life. They have significant experience with housing operations, residence education, or whatever their focus area is, but maybe they don't quite supervise full-time professionals. So perhaps they're supervising grads or working in some other specific function area or have transitioned from residential education to another area in housing and residence life. And so those are advancing professionals. And this also lines up really well with the UCUHO as they've added advancing professionals as a target audience for their organization as well. So those are our 5 target audiences. And again, the 2 I didn't mention, graduate assistants, so folks who are balancing their classroom work with housing residence life operations, doing all that good hard work. And then our senior housing officers, so folks who are the leads of their departments and organizations or divisions in some cases. Awesome. So the third category that you're going to be asked to fall into as you're working on your program proposal is your proposal tracks. And so we have 8 tracks this year. The setup is a little different than in previous years. So the first set of tracks I want to talk about is our Northwest UCUHO core competencies. So if you weren't aware, Northwest UCUHO has 4 core competencies, which I've listed up here. So encouraging professional development, promoting best practice, fostering collaborative sharing of ideas, and examining future industry trends. So when you're doing your program proposal, you'll be able to select 1 to 3 tracks. If you have just 1 track, that's absolutely fine. But if there are 2 or 3 you feel apply to your specific proposal, go ahead and note those as well. So when we're looking at these proposal tracks, what we're really trying to determine is like, how are we best supporting our Northwest UCUHO core purposes? So at the core of who we are as an organization, how are we translating that to the program that we're offering attendees? And so for encouraging professional development, I just want to note with that track, by attending a regional conference or a webinar or something like that, or a session, you are encouraging professional development. But a program that might fit in this track would be one that talks about maybe a case study of like how your institution has worked with professional development in your student staff or part-time staff. It might also be one where it focuses on how to map your own professional development. So you're still teaching about something on professional development, if that makes sense. So that's why I wanted to highlight that particular track and what that might mean. And then the other two, again, promoting best practices, really beneficial, like looking at where industry standards are and how we're meeting those needs. And then also looking to the future. So what are some future up and coming trends that are coming either out of facilities, operations, or residential education? What do we need to learn about those? And then that fostering collaborative sharing of ideas, that fits really well, or might fit really well if you are looking for your programming session to be interactive learning. That track might fit you particularly well. So as you're going through and watching this presentation, think about how the audience type, the program session type, and the proposal tracks interact with each other and what those might look like. The other thing that you'll want to consider doing is looking at the UDL proposal tracks. So for that, we have broken it down a little bit further. So we simplified the form. We have residence life, operations, facilities management, and universal design as our 4 additional tracks. So we have the 4 Northwest UDL core competencies, and then our 4 categories of UDL core competencies. So you have 8 track options to select from on the form. What we've also included on the form is a link to the UDL core competencies, so you can see how those break down. So I'm going to share those with you now. So we have for residence life, the UDL core competencies that we're fitting under that umbrella are going to be crisis management, resident education services, and student behavior. So all of those core competencies are fitting under the umbrella for this proposal of residence life. When we're looking at operations, we're looking at ancillary partnerships, conference services, evaluation and planning, fiscal resources and control, human resources, information technology, and occupancy. So those core competencies will fit under the umbrella of operations. When we look at facilities management, we're looking at facilities assessment, master planning, general and preventive maintenance, capital project management, sustainability, and inventory and control and materials handling. So again, that all fits under facilities management. And lastly, universal design. So these are some competencies that we've pulled out that we feel are particularly important. And those are diversity and social justice, leadership, employment policies, organizational change, and career development. So again, when you go into onto our Northwest UDL website to submit a program, you should see the link there to the UDL core competencies, so you can look at those in more detail. It's also in the program proposal submission form itself. So I would encourage you to take a look at that resource, the UDL core competencies, and really think about your proposal tracks. I think it can be really easy on a broad sweep to look and say, okay, I'm doing a program proposal on housing assignments. That's clearly going to fit in operations. Why you might want to go and look at the UDL core competencies is to see a little bit more around housing assignments and how UDL defines that within their standards, as well as thinking about how you might improve your proposal itself. So how are you defining housing assignments? How might that translate to other institutions? And it might help you decide a little bit more on your session type or your target audience. So those are the broad categories for the UDL competencies. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next section with description. So we've already covered our proposal tracks, our target audience, and our session type. That's all going to categorize your program for the reviewers, so we'll know exactly what audience you're trying to get to and like what your program looks like. Now in detail, what you're going to do in the next part, where you're going to spend more time working on your proposal, is the description piece. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the abstract. So the abstract is going to be your outward facing information. It's going to talk a bit about, it's going to be the information that appears in the conference guide. So it's what the attendees are going to see your program is about. It should provide a brief overview of the topic, and it should include at least one major takeaway. So with an abstract, it's really essential and important for your submission, that it is congruent with the rest of your document, because I have been that attendee who has read an abstract, gone to a program, and the program has been different than what was described. And so what we really want to make sure, again, is we're looking as reviewers, we're going to be looking for that congruency piece. Does your abstract match what you're telling us you're going to present? And so that I would actually recommend writing your abstract at the end. So once you've written a couple other components we're going to talk about, then write your abstract, because then you'll make sure it aligns with that very clearly. In addition to including one major takeaway, your abstract should clearly state the target audience. So we want to make sure that you're talking about the topic, target audience, and then again, what folks are going to learn from that. And the abstract is going to be about 50 words, and that'll be appearing again in the conference guide and Schedule, which is going to be our conference app for folks to see. Cool. So your description. So your description is going to be, in essence, an extension of your abstract. This is the internal facing part of your program proposal. It's going to provide an explanation of your programming track, your target audience, your session type that we just talked about. And it's going to make sure that you're going to explain why the content is relevant. So you're going to talk about in this description what participants are learning, and specifically you're going to talk about why you chose to have them learn in that way. So if you're doing a case study presentation, you're going to talk a bit about, you're describing your content. Here's what everyone's going to learn as a result of participating in this case study presentation. And here's why I chose a case study presentation as the means to do that. As you're writing your description, I recommend considering like what theories and strategies you're going to use to ground your program proposal. Consider how your program will be relevant to all provinces and states. So we have folks from Canada, folks from the US context. How's your program going to translate across those bridges and make sure that all participants have the opportunity to engage with that? How might your program translate across different institution types as well, is something to consider. Now, again, if your program session type is a case study presentation, it might be okay that it specifically focuses on a specific context or institution type, but you'll want to describe that in your description. So you'll want to acknowledge like, hey, my program proposal might not fit folks at a large institution, but that's because I chose to do a case study. So making sure that you're clearly describing that. I would say that with the description, being really clear and really filling in those gaps for reviewers is helpful, because all we're going to be able to review is the content you put forward. So if there's really important things or things that you think are very specific to your program, make sure that translate onto the paper so that way we can have the opportunity to see that. Cool. The next part I wanted to talk about is learning objectives. So we ask that everyone please submit 3 specific learning objectives. So you should articulate to what your attendee in essence will be able to know or be able to do after your session. So at the beginning of this presentation, I articulated 3 learning objectives. You feel free to use that as a model. It's also something most of our presenters do when they do Northwest UDL First Friday webinars. So feel free to look back at some of those for examples as well. Your learning objectives should reflect to some extent those categories we talked about. So audience type, session type, and program track. But what's really important is distilling into like 3 key points of what your participants will be learning. Another good thing about writing out your learning objectives is then you can pull one of your major learning objectives and put that into your abstract. Again, talking about those major takeaways and what that might look like. And the last thing you're going to do for us is you're going to present an outline. And so that outline is going to be a step-by-step breakdown of your program. It's going to talk about how you're going to get from point A to point B. It's going to tell us about the flow. And it's going to paint for the reviewers, in essence, a picture of what your program is going to look like. So we should be able to imagine you presenting in the room your program based on your outline. We ask that it details the strategies for learning. So how you're going to engage folks with the content. Are you going to do small groups, large groups? Is it going to be mainly lecture? And what that will look like. It should be in chronological order and include timelines. So if you're doing an introduction, it's great for us to know, like, introduction, 5 minutes. Overview learning objectives, 5 minutes. Content presentation and an outline what that content is, 10 to 15 minutes. So it doesn't need to be exact, but it is helpful for us to have a range of how long you're going to present on what topic. Better program proposals tend to have that information in there. You should also articulate clearly how you're going to achieve your learning objectives. So if you said that folks are going to learn how to facilitate small group discussion, you should have in your outline the way that you're going to do that, so folks come away with those tangible skills. And that might look like a variety of different ways, but it should be clearly stated in the outline. The last 2 things that are not on here, but I also want to mention are part of it. Some things we're going to ask for you is AV needs. So we're going to ask in the program proposal, what are your AV needs? Are you going to need a laptop projector? Are you going to need screens, microphones, things like that? Or if you don't need any AV at all and you're going to go technology free, that's also really good for us to know, because it's helpful as we review programs just to know what your plans are. There is no requirement for AV for presentations, and some folks choose not to, but you're welcome to use AV if you'd like, and we just need to know what that might look like. the last thing that we ask is your experience in the topic area. So this, if it's your first time presenting, that's awesome. We encourage first time presenters at Northwest ACUHO. It's just helpful for us to know. So for example, if you are presenting on RA training, and that is your program proposal, it's helpful for the reviewers to know that, oh, I lead the initiative of RA training, or I've been working on RA training for 5 years, which is why I would like to present on this topic. Again, that's going to be in a question that asks about your expertise or your strength in presenting in this area, just so we have a little bit more context on who you are as a presenter. Cool. So that is everything on the submission of a program proposal and what that looks like. And then what I'm going to do now is transition into universal design for learning and talk a little bit about how you might be able to apply this concept into your program proposal. So universal design for learning is a framework for developing accessible pathways for learning. The goal in this case is to accommodate as many learners as possible, and it's based on a social justice approach for learners with disabilities. I really enjoy using this framework. It's something that I use whenever I construct a training for student staff or professional staff on campus, and it's becoming more and more important. We have a growing number of folks with disabilities in higher education, not only our students, but our staff as well. And folks might not disclose that they have a disability, which is absolutely fine. And so as a presenter and educator, we need to prepare to accommodate a variety of learners. And it's just really a great foundation for adult education to do so. And so the universal design framework works in that way. What it does in essence is there's 3 domains: engagement, representation, and action expression. And what universal design for learning does is it breaks out these 3 domains into tangible points of action that you could take as a presenter to ensure that folks are engaged in the learning that there is occurring in your program session. So when we talk about engagement, we're talking about the why of learning. So what that means is that for attendee, it's the why am I here in this learning this information? Why is this information relevant to me? So it addresses the reason that people are motivated to attend your program session. And different learners, as we all know, have different ways of obtaining knowledge. For example, some people love the first Friday webinar experience and like to do it live. Other folks might read it after, and then some folks might interact and ask questions because that's how they prefer to gain information, is to ask questions about the content. And it's important to provide multiple ways of people to engage. So when you're thinking about how your attendees are participating in your conference, as you're writing your outline, think about the different ways that they're participating. Is it all going to be lecture-based? Are your attendees going to have the opportunity to interact in small groups? Is it going to be large group discussion? Are they going to do an activity? All these are methods of engagement that address that why of learning, that address the motivation of your attendees. The second component of universal design for learning talks about the what of learning. And what that means is it's talking about how information is being given and distilled to learners and how learners are perceiving that information. And so when we go to representation, lots of folks think about the idea of having audiovisual aids. So do we have a video? Do we have something folks are reading? Are we just talking? What is the way that the information is being conveyed, and how are people able to perceive that information? It's important to note, like, multiple means of representation, and by that I mean many ways that people can perceive information, allow people to make connections. This is also a great thing to include in your description as well as in your outline. How are people going to be able to perceive that information? Are you going to have handouts? Or are people going to be able to access the information at a later date? Something that Northwest ACUHO does really well, I think, is hand out that business card at the end of a session and let people know, give me a call or contact me, email me if you have questions, or if you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint for after. One year when I presented with my colleague, we created a little Google website that had all of our documents and resources linked, if you gave people a little business card, so that way they could just go to that website and download all of the information. And also the important thing to note is that there's no one way to present information that will benefit all learners. There's not that magic type of presentation that fits everyone's needs, but it's really important to just think and consider how you're going to accommodate the most needs possible. And again, that's why we go back and we have those categories. So you can think about how might people engage with the panel discussions versus how they might engage differently with an interactive learning session. So that's just really something to consider as you're putting together your proposal. And the last thing is action and expression, which is the how of how people learn. So when we're thinking about that, we want to think about how are learners and attendees sharing what they know? So are they talking to their colleagues? Are they going to chat with people after? How are we confirming that they've had takeaways and they've learned from the session? There's many ways that people can navigate a learning environment. In this case, when we're thinking about how they learn. And again, there's no one way for attendees to share like what they have learned. In the past, I've attended sessions where folks do small group activities at the end, where folks share points of learning with the presenter, so you can have kind of this group knowledge share. But it's really important to consider like how people are engaging with their content, and like what opportunities you are giving as a presenter for folks to engage. Which is why I really encourage folks as they're working on their program proposals to consider, like, are you doing a pure lecture format, or are you incorporating other components? For some cases and session types, it's really important to have that base of knowledge, because you might be talking about a theory or teaching something very specific, which requires a lot of that that verbal communication, a lot of that lecture-based presenting. And at the same time, you might be able to work in some additional activities or ways that people can talk about or reflect on what they've learned. Cool. So this is just the information presented another way. When we're looking at the Universal Design for Learning framework, I'm going to include in this, at the end of the PowerPoint, I have links to all of this information. The Universal Design for Learning website is a really great resource. It has everything laid out very clearly, and you can kind of click on the different mediums and domains that they have and learn a bit more. So when we're looking at implementing universal design, and you're looking about how you might incorporate that not only into your proposal, but your presentation ultimately, and program ultimately, you can look at different ways. We talk about the 3 major domains. So when we're talking about engagement, when we talk about the ideas of recruiting interest and sustained effort and persistence and self-regulation, those are all things that really promote that engagement, right? That why people are there to learn. And so all of these things, these subpoints, talk about how people are continuously being engaged in the content you're presenting. So how are we recruiting interest? What does your abstract look like? And it's clear that people will have a clear understanding of the why of why they're learning the content. How are people being engaged throughout the presentation, right? How are they sustaining their effort and persisting as learners? And how are they have the opportunity to self-regulate? So are there ways for them to engage in a way that works for them as learners, or is there one avenue for engagement? The what of learning, again, representation being the overall domain. And then below that, we have ideas around perception, how information is being displayed. Is it in a PowerPoint or Prezi, or is it in a written format? Is it self-generated content? So we've had presenters who in the past have not had technology, and they've instead done an information share where they have folks go up and write their content. And so then after that, they've typed up the information people have shared and then sent that out to people who were at the presentation. So again, using language and symbols and using that in a very specific way. And then comprehension. So thinking about how people are comprehending information. Is it visual? Is it auditory? And is it through action? And then lastly, again, that how of learning, just when we implement it, we're thinking about physical action. How are folks engaging in the room? And is physical action required? So it's important to think from an accessibility standpoint. If you have an activity where folks are moving around, do they need to move around to complete the activity? Or what accommodations are you making so people don't need to maybe participate in that physical action? Expression and communication, are attendees talking to each other, talking through the presenter? Writing and reflecting and then sharing responses. What does that look like? And again, executive function. So thinking about like how folks are optimizing their own learning. So these are all things that can be found in more detail on the website. But what I want to do for y'all is give a few examples of what this might look like. So because you're looking at all these things, I've said, okay, she's gone over these massive domains. She's gone over some subpoints for the domains. How might folks translate that into what we're asking for a presenter? So what I want to do is talk a little bit about how you translate. And so first I have is an interactive learning activity example. So if you're doing the program session on interactive learning, and so going back, the interactive learning session type is going to be a session where you are having folks engage in a specific activity and their learning is going to come from that. So your session focuses on activity-based, and it should be able to translate across a variety of different institutions. And again, the emphasis is learn by doing. So when you use engagement, think about what you could do is focus on sustained effort and persistence. So focusing again on all 3 sub-bullets, but just one. So you're thinking about how people are going to foster community. And so having attendees get into groups to discuss or to work on activity together might be how you do engagement in that manner. You might think about your representation of your topic through perception. And one way you might do that is by having videos or other media that has captions. So that way people are receiving the content in different ways. You might also decide to give both verbal and written instructions to your attendees. And then action expression, where you're looking at an interactive learning activity. You have attendees engage in a variety of activities. So you might have them throughout your session engage in a small group discussion, some case study review, a written reflection, or a variety of other activities that folks can come up with. So just come again, thinking about multiple ways for folks to like construct knowledge and think about how they would engage with your content. And then when we look at a collaborative information sharing, again, that's going to be the program where you're sharing a strategy, an approach, a theory, something that you implement at your institution that can be shared across a wide variety of institution types. Using those same 3 domains might look different. So when I look at engagement, you like look at recruiting interest instead. So like being very clear in your abstract and in your introduction of how this information is going to be relevant to a variety of institution types like US, Canada, size, public, private, and other variables. When you think about representation in this context, you might decide to focus on comprehension. So you might think about how you are clearly articulating your major themes and presentations and how you're weaving your learning objectives throughout the presentation. So when you're developing your learning objectives in your proposal, really thinking about how that fits into your description and thinking about how you're clearly identifying those learning objectives being met throughout your presentation to your attendees. And action expression in this way might look different, like in physical action. So if you're using a variety of methods for learners to engage with your presentation, you might have attendees respond and ask questions or share institutional demographics through multiple platforms. So you might decide you want to do a little poll everywhere in your presentation, which is absolutely fine to have people share out that way. You might get people into small groups and you might do a respond and ask with you as the presenter facilitating that. So there's a variety of ways you can do that with a collaborative information share. So hopefully going through those 2 examples gave you a couple ideas of how you might apply universal design for learning to your program proposal and ultimately your program as well. And so what I want to end on is just a few parting thoughts. So thinking about all the content I presented, the walkthrough of the program proposal submission, some things just to keep in mind as you're going through, and my advice as you're writing your program proposals. So the first thing you want to do is to spend time writing and revising a proposal. You might have a couple ideas, not too many ideas. You might have 10 ideas. You're not sure where to start. Just start writing one. Go through the website. You can review this webinar and just write like, okay, this is my general idea, and then write as much as you can about the points. You don't need to go in great detail, but just bullet it out for yourself. And then spend some time revising it. So refining your idea and making sure you're presenting it in the way that you want it presented. The program proposals that really spend the time with writing and revising are the ones that are the most successful. Be thoughtful about who you're presenting to and what will be learned. So be really thoughtful about what your audience is. It is absolutely okay if you focus on a very specific audience and the audience is a smaller proportion of our membership. That's totally fine because your program proposal will probably be very specific and good, and it's going to meet the need of some of our members. And so I would say it's really good to be specific. So if you are presenting to graduate assistants and resident and folks who are entry-level professionals, don't try and write a proposal that it also meets the needs of senior housing officers and mid-level professionals and advancing professionals. Just focus on the 2 groups you're trying to really meet the needs of and stick to that, because your program proposal will, as a result, be more specific and will be very clear. Use your resources. So at the end of this PowerPoint and on our website, we have a lot of resources for folks to be able to use and engage with. And I would just recommend that you do that. If you're not sure where to go or a bit stuck, use your resources. Look at past presentations you've done and really think about like what you've done as a presenter that's been successful in the past and how you can do that. And then also, you're welcome to email me. I am happy to answer any questions that you have regarding program proposals, recommendations, or if you want to bounce an idea off me, I am available to do that. And I would be very excited to do so with you. Check and double check for typos and grammar errors. I am notoriously the worst person for that. Grammar is not my strength, but I'm always checking and double checking and then sending over to a colleague to have them double check as well, because as many times as I read it and I think it's perfect, I'll miss something. So make sure you're just double checking for those things. It can really throw off your presentation and the cleanliness and the look of your submission. So I would just recommend doing that. And that's, again, why I'd recommend that you write it in a Word document first rather than going through and filling it out in the Google Doc itself. And again, going along with that, to have your proposal reviewed. So have your proposal reviewed perhaps by a colleague, but also maybe by someone who you're the target audience for. So if you're writing something for a mid-level professional, contact a colleague who's a mid-level professional and have them review your program proposal and ask, did this make sense? Strong proposals result in strong programs. So that's just something I want to know is the more effort you put into the program proposal, the better your program is. And when you've put a lot of effort into your proposal, your program requires less work on the back end. This is just something I like to reiterate again and again. I think sometimes we think, okay, I put all this work into a proposal that may or may not be accepted. I'll wait and I'll put more work in once I've been accepted. I would say put more work in the front end so that way it's good to go. And then the other thing to note is for our folks who are on the alternate list for programs or maybe don't get accepted this year, you can represent the same content next year with improvements. And we also, as reviewers, will also provide feedback if you would like that. So we can provide you feedback for your presentation to make it stronger for the next time you submit it, or you can then have that basis to submit it for another or a different conference. So it's just good to put in more work in the front end because it's going to result in a better program. Own your knowledge. So this is one I just want to remind folks of, excuse me, is that y'all know stuff. We're all like professionals. We have experience. We've gone through classes specific to this. No one's going to know your own story, your own experience better than yourself. So own your own knowledge and know that you are a rock star. I'm very confident that you are and that you can present on this topic. It is probably your area of expertise, or it's something that you have a very significant amount of experience in. So make sure you own your knowledge and confidence and know that if you're putting together your own program and your own program proposal, no one's going to know that program proposal better than you are. And so it's just your job to make sure that the knowledge that you already have is conveyed in the best way for our reviewers. And the last thing I'd like to say is if you do receive feedback or ask for that feedback, consider implementing a feedback receipt. And that's not only from the reviewers, but also from your colleagues. So people who you've asked to review your proposal, make sure you're implementing any feedback that you receive, because it's just going to make your proposal stronger, or it might just bring in a new perspective that you weren't aware of when you originally wrote it. So those are my general parting thoughts for folks. And the last slide I wanted to pull up is the resources I talked about. So the UDL core competencies, when I talked about program tracks, this is the link on how you get to those. The Northwest UDL program proposal website has all of this information I presented on written out. And we'll also have this first Friday webinar available on the website for folks to review, as well as on our Northwest UDL YouTube channel. And the last thing is the Universal Design for Learning Guidelines. Those are also available at that website, and it's a really great and beneficial if you're looking to gain more content and skills in that area. So that is the information and the resources I have for you. So I will turn it back over to Andrew.
All right, thank you, Janie, so much. Not sure where I'm getting the feedback from. Sorry about that. But thank you for presenting today. I went ahead and I put the assessment and the feedback on the chat there. So if you want to fill that out, that'd be greatly appreciated. And we'll see you next month. Thank you.